Alright guys, I'm the NFL Addict, and today I will be making my NFL record predictions for the 2021 Washington football team. And yes, they are still a Washington football team, and it has been said that their name won't be announced until next offseason, so no new name yet. Alright, now Washington, but before we get started, like and subscribe to all that. But anyways, Washington, they probably have one of the best defenses in the entire league. I don't think it's the best. I think, there's one or two above them, and that's mainly because their linebacker core with, Jamin Davis, who I didn't really agree too much with that pick, and John Bostic. It isn't spectacular, but it is, it's okay. It's not terrible. It doesn't bring that whole defense down a lot. It's not perfect. But it is probably a top three defense, in my opinion, probably the third best in the league. That offense is kind of their weak spot. That offensive line, and obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't the best. However, signing Curtis Samuel and Adam Humphries gives them a great wide receiver too. One of the better wide receiver, not best, not one of the best, but one of the better wide receiver duos in the league. And Adam Humphries, who's going to be a pretty solid wide receiver 3. Logan Thomas, a pretty good tight end. And obviously, their pretty good second-year running back in Antonio Gibson. Now, in Week 1, they have a home game against the Los Angeles Chargers. And this will probably be our first really big test not test, but a big showing for the Chargers because they have a completely new coaching staff. Anthony Lynn is no longer with them, which is really great. That offense is doing pretty great. That defense isn't spectacular, but I do like what they've got going on their offense. So it's kind of like Washington's perfect game here. It's going to be a pretty close one, but I feel like Washington with a really good defense going up with an okay offense going up against an okay defense. I like Washington's defense over Los Angeles' offense more than I like the other one in Chargers' favor, but whatever. Washington's going to get the win in Week 1. They jump up to 1-0, and then in Week 2, it's their first primetime game, their first divisional game, and it's a pretty important one. I feel like the NFC East is probably going to be between Washington and the Giants. So the fact that it's early season, they've got one matchup, and at the end of the season they've got another one. This is going to be a pretty interesting rivalry to watch this year. But anyways, a home game against the Giants. Obviously, the Giants also have a pretty solid defense. I don't think it's one of the best. I think maybe if you're talking to a Giants fan, they would say it's top 10, and they wouldn't be too crazy about it. I think they're probably top 15 maybe, but they did start to show up a lot later last season. They started to show up. I mean, they had a pretty good defense. I feel like that if that end of the season game wasn't between Washington and the Eagles, it was between Washington and the Giants. That last Sunday Night Football game, I feel like Washington would have lost. I feel like the Giants are probably the better team. But coming into this year, with the completely revamped offense, a completely revamped wide receiver room, I like Washington to win at least one of these games. I'm not too sure about Week 18. I don't know if it's going to be a split or a sweep for Washington, but we'll see. In Week 3, they're going up against one of the best teams in the league in the Buffalo Bills. And I'm sorry, but Washington, they're not quite there yet. And in Week 4, they're going against the Falcons, who should have drafted Justin Fields. I feel like he was the better pick there by a long shot. However, that wouldn't change anything. I feel like Matt Ryan would still be starting this year. So the Kyle Pitts draft pick does actually help for Week 4 and does make them better. However, that defense, it did start to show up a bit late last season, but this offseason hasn't been great to it. And yeah, I feel like they focused a lot more on the offense this last season. I just feel like Washington will be able to stop it, especially with the loss of Julio Jones, one of the best wide receivers in the league, and he let him go for almost nothing. Washington gets the win here. And it's a revenge for a couple of years back. By the way, I forgot to mention that Washington is my favorite team, so, I've been pretty excited for this. I'm trying to stay unbiased, but, I do like Washington. And then in Week 5, they have a home game against the Saints, who I wouldn't count them out. A lot of people are counting them out, saying that they're going to have, there's no chance that they have a winning record or whatever. But in my opinion, I feel like that they're actually a pretty good team still. They did lose Drew Brees, obviously, but Jameis Winston, after a year sitting behind Drew Brees, he obviously knows that his problem is interceptions, and a lot of that had to do with decision-making, which can be, fixed by sitting behind Drew Brees, who was pretty good at not throwing interceptions, especially earlier in his career, but I feel like a lot of it later in his career had to do with the fact that, he was getting older. So, and like his arm strength he was obviously failing a lot of his passes, but we're not talking about Drew Brees. Anyways, and obviously their defense, they lost Norris Jenkins and the tight end, but really that's the only biggest things they've lost. That's by far the biggest things that they've lost this whole offseason. And I feel like their defense is still really, really solid, and I feel like they can get the win over Washington. It's going to be a close one, and when I finish this and I do worst case, best case scenario, Washington will win this one in best case, but I feel like Washington does have a pretty good shot here, but New Orleans, that defense is just so good in that offense. With Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, you can't ignore them. It's going to be tough for Washington to win this one. And then in Week 6, playing against the best team in the league. I'm sorry, but Kansas City's going to win this one. Not really too much of a question there. All right, now they've gone from 3-1, looking like one of the better teams in the league. Wouldn't be surprised if they're the number one team in their division at that point. Lost 2 in a row, and now they're down to 3-3. But in Week 7, they have an away game against the Green Bay Packers. And the Packers, without Aaron Rodgers, with Jordan Love, who it's not going to be terrible, especially after him having 6 weeks of experience now in game. And obviously, he did have a year sitting behind Aaron Rodgers last year. I think that Green Bay is still going to have a really, really good offense. It's just the fact that Washington also has a really, really good defense, and Green Bay doesn't have that much of a defense. And I like this Washington defense over Green Bay's offense, and I like this Washington offense over this Green Bay defense. So yeah, Washington is going to get the win here in Week 7. I think it's a good matchup for Washington. But yeah, so now they bump back up to 4-3. They have an away game against Denver. Denver really doesn't have that much of a offense really at all. They have nothing really. I honestly would be surprised if Teddy Bridgewater is a starter right now. I'm just gonna assume that Drew Lock is still starting, but in real life, let me just say, wouldn't be surprised if this is Teddy Bridgewater up against Ryan Fitzpatrick here, or even Taylor Heineke, because from what I've heard, Taylor Heineke's looking pretty good, but I'm just gonna assume Ryan Fitzpatrick. But anyways, the thing I would be scared about for Washington is the fact that Denver completely ramped up their secondary, re-signing Justin Simmons, signing Kyle Fuller, completely doing it all over. I would be a bit scared, but in the end, I think Washington will get the win here. So they are 5-3 going into their bye week before a really tough game against a rematch from the playoffs last year, at least a rematch of Washington against the Super Bowl champs. And that is going to be a tough one. But they're 5-3. Now let's talk about this one. I'm sorry, but Tampa Bay might be also one of the best teams in the league, so I doubt that they're going to get a loss against Washington. So Washington back down to 5-4. I honestly, I'm a Washington fan living in North Carolina, so I notice these things. Washington has played Carolina the past 3 or 4 years, and it's always been kind of back and forth. And I think right now Carolina's not doing its best. Last year, Washington almost beat them. It was tough, and that was with Dwayne Haskins and a lot of injuries. So Washington's going to get the win here against Carolina, who ends up being 7-10 by the way. You can see all the other records over here. I probably wouldn't hide them if I could, but also, it kind of spoils a lot of other videos. But in week, did I not? Please? Can we get that on there, please? Come on, website. Predictions, by the way, it's completely free. And this guy, he's great. He updates it really quickly. Every week he changes it so you can start predicting. Like if it's week 3, you can set it to where it has all the week 3 games selected as they happen in real life, and then you can go from there. And also, you can't pick ties, but I'm not gonna pick ties, guys. Don't worry. Yeah, I picked that one just to show, but it was too late. But anyways, week 12, a home game against one of the best teams in the league again. Not one of the best, but a really, really good team in the league. It was a pretty close game last year, so this one actually is pretty close. I know I just started to act like it was, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, Buffalo game, but really I feel like this one actually is going to be pretty close. Now that I'm actually thinking about it, this Seattle secondary against the Washington's new and, renewed passing attack, this actually is a pretty good matchup for Washington. I don't think the Seattle secondary is astounding. And then, the Seattle defense as a whole obviously isn't its biggest, benefit, whatever. But their offense is still pretty good. So I think this will be a close one. But, and this is actually a surprise to me, I'm going to have Washington win here because I feel like seeing how they played last year, and I feel like Washington has gotten so much better over the offseason. And honestly, if Washington was completely healthy, they might have even won that game last year. So, yeah, I think Washington actually gets the win here in Week 12, which actually kind of surprises me because I didn't expect to pick that. But as I started thinking about things, I was like, oh, wait. Yeah. So in Week 13, they have an away game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Still feels weird to say. I'm just so used to saying Oakland, and saying Las Vegas Raiders, it just sounds kind of weird. But Washington, I feel like is going to get the win here. Las Vegas just a bit below. Now, do you see how every single one of these games, Week 14, they have 5 straight divisional games. So they play 13 weeks of football with only one divisional game. And then they finish it off with 5 straight divisional games, which is going to be really, it's going to be really good or it's going to be pretty tough. Obviously, any divisional game is going to be tough. But in Week 14, they have a home game against the Dallas Cowboys, who they re-signed Dak, which is definitely a good thing. I think they overpaid him. I think, they're overvaluing him a bit, but he is still a solid QB. And they added a lot to that secondary, which is definitely going to be good against this Washington team, who I feel like will be more pass focused, especially seeing how Ryan Fitzpatrick played last year and how Ron Rivera has played in years past and how they played in that playoff game. I feel like this is maybe a kind of a good matchup for Dallas, but I'm going to have Washington win here just because I really like this Washington defense, especially that defensive line going up against Dallas is absolutely terrible, horrendous offensive line, which I don't know if I've mentioned in this video yet, or I probably haven't since I haven't talked about Dallas. They didn't do anything to help their offensive line, which is one of the worst in the league last year. So yeah, now they're 9-4. They have an away game against Philadelphia, who basically got rid of everybody. Philadelphia just completely got rid of everybody. They're hoping that Jalen Hurts is the quarterback of the future, but I think he's going to be good. I think he'll probably start for 3 or 4, maybe 5 more years. But seeing as he had 1 or 2 good games, especially that Saints game. Well, that wasn't him, but still, he had some really good games last year. But also towards the end of the season, we saw teams start figuring him out and picking him apart. So yeah, I feel like Washington's going to get the win here. To jump up to 10-4, which is kind of crazy. I'm going to be accused of just be ready. I'm mentally preparing myself. If you go in the comments right now, I guarantee you, if there's more than like 50 views on this video, there's probably some comments talking about how biased I am or something from like a Dallas fan. But in Week 16, I'm probably going to have Dallas actually split because I was talking about how good of a matchup this is for Dallas. I expected to have them sweeping, but as I think about it, I'm actually going to have Dallas split here. Washington's going to sweep Philadelphia, and the more I think about it, this could be a pretty important game, but I'm going to have the Giants get the split against Washington. So yeah, they ended up going 11-6. Wouldn't be surprised if that's... I don't know, though, because the Giants are also pretty good. If you're interested in who's going to win the division, if it's Washington or the Giants, because I think they're kind of similar teams. I have them splitting. I think they're kind of in the same skill range. I like Giants offense more than I like the Washington offense, and I like that Washington defense more than I like the Giants defense. So, I mean, if you're looking forward to that, then I hope to see you in my next video when I'm talking about the New York Giants. And obviously, if you're a Washington fan and you are mad that I made you guys 11-6, and you think it should be either. I mean, I've had people think that I made their teams too high. I mean, I usually joke about it, but I actually had a fan tell me like, "Bro, how are we winning more than 7 games?" And they got mad. But if you think it should be 6-11, just let me know. Like the video, subscribe, or dislike it if you didn't like it, but still subscribe. I mean, come on. Sometimes it's fun to watch people you think are stupid talk about football. I do it all the time with like Adam Rank and stuff. Every year I watch those Adam Rank videos, even though he is the dumbest person to live. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in my next one, especially if you're interested in the NFC East thing, or you could just skip to, an NFC West video if you're that far in the future. And